Hello, we are talking today about comma rules. There are 10 comma rules, and we're going to discuss all 10 because commas rule. Commas tell us where to pause when we read. They can also provide us with very important clues about what exactly we mean. You can change the whole meaning of a sentence, believe it or not, just by changing the commas. Still, commas can seem like a mystery to many writers. This presentation is designed to make it just a little bit easier to know when to use a comma. In each of the following slides, you will see a comma rule. You will also see an extra example, or maybe two, of a sentence that uses this rule. If you look carefully, you'll notice that each of the rule uses the rule it's talking about. Comma rule number 1. Two independent clauses can be linked by a comma, but you also need a conjunction. Let's find the two independent clauses here. The first, two independent clauses can be linked by a comma. The second, you also need a conjunction. Each of these is an independent clause that we have connected by using a comma and the conjunction but. Let's read the rule again. Two independent clauses can be linked by a comma, but you also need a conjunction. Here are some extra examples. I forgot my criterion password, and I would be grateful if you could email it to me. My mother wants to borrow my car, so I have to stop at the gas station to fill up the tank. Your job is not complete unless you have both the comma and the conjunction. In these three examples, we have a comma but, a comma and a comma so. Comma rule number 2. After an introductory phrase, a writer needs to use a comma. An introductory phrase is also called a subordinate or dependent clause that we attach to an independent clause. The independent clause here is a writer needs to use a comma. The phrase that we attach to it has the connecting word at the beginning, after, which promises that something else is going to be connected to that phrase. We connect it with a comma. After an introductory phrase, a writer needs to use a comma. Here are some extra examples. When I was only 6 years old, my mother taught me how to cook spaghetti. If I had a dime for every time I forgot my watch, I'd have enough to buy a new watch. Again, look for those connecting words when, if, after, and you look for the end of the phrase and place your comma. Comma rule number 3. Use a comma to attach non-essential information that you are adding to a sentence, which might sound like this. Here, we attach the phrase, which might sound like this, to a sentence that doesn't really need that phrase. We attach it with a comma. Use a comma to attach non-essential information that you are adding to a sentence, which might sound like this. Here's some extra examples. Please notice that what's being added to the end of every sentence doesn't really need to be there. It's just there to make the sentence more interesting or to give the reader a little bit more information. Many college students struggle to pay tuition costs, which seem to rise every year. I gave my little sister a dress to wear to the prom, a dress that no longer fits me. Comma rule number 4. When you have a phrase that interrupts your sentence, also called an appositive phrase, you need commas on both sides of the interruption. You'll notice in this rule that the sentence makes sense without the interruption in the middle as well. When you have a phrase that interrupts your sentence, you need commas on both sides of the interruption. See, that sentence didn't need that interrupting phrase, but the interrupting phrase gives us a little bit more information about what we're talking about. We have commas on both sides so that our reader knows that we're going to get back to the subject soon. Here's some extra examples. My Aunt Jennifer, the woman who raised me, is a wonderful cook. Again, you can see that this sentence works just as well without the appositive phrase. My Aunt Jennifer is a wonderful cook is a lovely sentence. However, it's important for our reader to know that this is the woman who raised me. So we put that important information inside commas when it interrupts our sentence. My Aunt Jennifer, the woman who raised me, is a wonderful cook. My criterion password, which was working yesterday, does not seem to be working today. Again, we could just as easily write my criterion password does not seem to be working today, but we have an interrupting phrase in the middle to let our reader know that the password was working yesterday. Comma rule number 5. We use commas to separate the items in lists of 3 or more nouns, adjectives, ideas, or even activities. Let's take a look at the items in this list. In our list, we have nouns, adjectives, ideas, and activities. We have a comma between each, even the last one. Here are some extra examples. I enjoy all sorts of summer sports like swimming, comma, biking, comma, hiking, comma, and tennis. Here's one more example. My weekend was spent cleaning the house, comma, washing clothes, comma, and doing homework. Comma rule number 6. Dr. Swanberg says, good writers will use commas before quotations. You can see here that the quotations indicate that this is exactly what Dr. Swanberg said. The comma is used to separate it from the rest of the phrase. Extra examples. My grandmother used to say, comma, anything worth doing is worth doing well. The doctor told me, comma, I hope you will take good care of this patient during your shift tonight. Comma rule number 7. Students at LawsonState Community College at 9th Avenue Southwest, Bessemer, Alabama, will use commas between the elements of an address. Let's take a look at this rule. The first element in the address is the street number, 9th Avenue Southwest. The second element is Bessemer, the city. The third element is Alabama, the state. We put a comma between each element. Here are some extra examples. My mother used to live at 6 East Avenue, comma, Kennebunkport, comma, Maine. Again, we separate the street from the town from the state. We do the same thing in New York. My friend moved to 345 West 8th Street, comma, New York, comma, New York. Here comes rule number 8. Comma rule number 8. Commas, dear students, are used around both sides of a name when we address someone directly in our sentences. In this sentence, I've called you my dear students, and I've spoken the sentence directly to you. I could use your name in place of the word dear students, but I don't know who's viewing this. Here's the next example. No, Jane, I don't want to see another picture of your dog. Yes, Fred, I would love it if you could help me change my tire. When we speak to people directly, we separate them from the sentence we are addressing to them using a comma. Comma rule number 9. Dear students, comma, please use commas after greetings when you are writing a letter or a formal email. You should also use one after your salutation. Thanks, Dr. Swanberg. Let's take a look at this rule. After the greeting, dear students, and after the sign-off, thanks, there are commas. Here's an extra example. Dear Dr. Swanberg, I was unable to make it to class today. Please send my homework with my brother. Thanks, comma, Jane student. Here we go. Rule number 10. It's the last one. Comma rule number 10. I taught my students on Tuesday, January 19th, 1991, that commas are used to separate similar elements in a date. Here's an important hint. We use commas to separate the words from other words and numbers from other numbers. We don't need commas between the words and the numbers. In other words, we separate Tuesday from January, and we separate 19 from 1991, but we don't need a comma to separate January and 19. This is because no one is likely to think that 19 is part of the word January, but if we had the numbers 191991 all together, things could get a little confusing. Here are some extra examples. Your essay is due Wednesday, comma, March 6th, comma, 2011. Our next appointment is Saturday, comma, June 12th, comma, 2012. I hope this helps. You can go over these rules as many times as you need to. And remember this, if it's not following one of these rules, you might not need a comma.